special security and community development measures, the Mount Salem Community and Environs in the Parish of St. James Zone, extension of period of operation, number 2, Order 2025 Resolution, the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Denham Town Community Zone, extension of period of operation, number 2, Order 2025 Resolution, the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Greenwich Town Zone, extension of period of operation, number 2, Order 2025 Resolution, the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Parade Garden Zone, extension of period of operation, number 2, Order 2025 Resolution, the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Norwood Community in the Parish of St. James Zone, extension of period of operation, number 2, Order 2025 Resolution, the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Savannah Zone, extension of period of operation, number 2, Order 2025 Resolution, the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Augustown Zone, extension of period of operation, number 2, Order 2025, which were all laid on the table of the House of Representatives on the 9th day of December 2025. Madam Speaker, I beg to give further notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take these motions.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Notice is about presentation of bills without leave of the House. First obtained, Minister Williams.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the first reading of a bill shortly entitled the Financial Investigation Division Amendment Act 2025.
Members, the question is that the standing orders be suspended to allow the minister to take first reading of the bill. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister.
Madam Speaker, I now move that a bill shortly entitled the Financial Investigations Division Amendment Act 2025 be read a first time.
A bill shortly entitled the Financial Investigations Division Amendment Act 2025 read a first time.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill.
Thank you, Minister. Public business.
I now move for the suspension of standing orders. Madam Speaker, I now move the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take the motions, notice of which I gave earlier.
The question is that the standing orders be suspended to enable the Prime Minister to take the motion, notice of which he gave earlier. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Prime Minister, you may start the debate. Turn your mic on, please, Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, what I am about to present is beyond debate. Beyond debate. Madam Speaker, I come before this Honourable House not merely to seek the extension of the zones of special operations, but to affirm unequivocally that we are winning the war against violence in the Madam Speaker, over the last 9 years, Jamaica has achieved historic socio-economic and infrastructural progress, coupled with decisive security reforms, intelligence-led policing, and an unrelenting focus on dismantling criminal gangs. Even in the wake of the most devastating natural disaster in our modern history, Hurricane Melissa, which inflicted damage estimated at $8.8 billion or 41% of GDP and affected over 900,000 persons, public order held. The institutions of the state held. Our security architecture held. Madam Speaker, this resilience is the product of deliberate policy choices in the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Melissa. Despite widespread displacement, disruption of livelihoods, and infrastructure damage, the security forces reported no widespread breakdown of law and order. Outside of 3 isolated incidents of looting, which were swiftly contained, Jamaica did not descend into chaos. That outcome stands as powerful evidence of a security apparatus that is now more robust, more coordinated, and more trusted than at any point in recent history. Madam Speaker, the result speaks with unmatched clarity, as at December 8, 2025, Jamaica recorded 632 murders, 463 fewer than the same period last year. Madam Speaker, that represents a 42.5% reduction in killings, with projections placing total murders to below 700 by year-end. Shootings are also down 32%. These are numbers Jamaica has not seen in over 3 decades. And it is a direct outcome of sustained anti-gang operations, legislative reform, intelligence coordination, and disciplined application of the clear hole build strategy within the zones of special operations. Madam Speaker, let us be clear. Gangs thrive where the state retreats. Zozos represent the permanent return of the state. Security, social services, infrastructure, education, health, and opportunity. We are returning the state into communities that were previously abandoned to criminal governance. The zones do not merely suppress violence. They dismantle the ecosystem that allows gangs to recruit, extort, intimidate, and control. Madam Speaker, even as we register historic gains, we remain sober about the risks. Hurricane has undoubtedly created new vulnerabilities: displacement, economic shock, psychological trauma, and opportunities for criminal exploitation. This is precisely why Zozos are more relevant now than ever. They harden communities against regression. They prevent shocks from becoming opportunities for gangs to reassert control. They protect the gains that Jamaicans have sacrificed to achieve. Madam Speaker, the road ahead requires discipline, endurance, and national unity. Security is a continuous building exercise. And this is why the government has made and will continue to make major financial and institutional investments in the zones of special operations. These investments have already delivered measurable reductions in serious violent crimes, tangible physical transformation, and sustained support for citizens whose lives were once defined by fear. Madam Speaker, through the clear hole build framework enshrined in the law reform legislation, the state clears gangs from spaces, holds that space with reinforced security, and then builds lasting social and economic infrastructure. This is how we permanently restore meaningful citizenship, dignity, and lawful authority. Therefore, Madam Speaker, we now seek the continued support of this Honorable House to extend all 7 existing zones of special operations: Mount Salem, Denham Town, August Town, Greenwich Town, Norwood, Parade Gardens, and Savannah Lamar. Madam Speaker, the ministry papers have been tabled, which outlines the activities for the last period. In terms of murder statistics, the data provided by the Jamaica Constabulary Force as at December 6, 2025, for the period prior to and during the declaration of the respective ZOZOs, there has been an overall 38% reduction in murders and a 48% reduction in shootings for all zones for the comparative period. This extension will be an affirmation of success and a declaration of resolve. Madam Speaker, Jamaica has turned a corner. We are no longer managing violence. We are breaking its back. And the zones of special operations stand at the very center of that historic national transformation. As I said, Madam Speaker, this is beyond debate. Since I've been obliged, Madam Speaker, I will take it very quickly, since I've been obliged.
Prime Minister, I saw. That was very quick. Member from St. Catherine South. Oh, you were first. Member from St. James Central. Member from St. James Central. Member from
Madam Speaker.
St. James West Central. No, the mic goes on one by one in sequence. So the challenge is nobody should have turned on their mics at all.
Yes.
And member from St. James Central, West. Member from St. James West Central, would you be so kind as to allow the member from St. Catherine South to respond first, and then you go ahead. And there is follow-up from 2, please. 4. I'm not seeing one person. So I have first Member Russell, and then Member Buchanan. No, yes, but that's what I'm doing. So the member Jackson, member from St. Catherine South, is going to go first. And then, Member Hilton, you held your hand up too? Member Hilton. So members, would you be so kind as to turn off all your mics? Thank you. Member from St. Catherine South, you go ahead first, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Prime Minister, I saw you were gesturing to open and close immediately without allowing for participation. But I take that as an oversight on your part. You know, those of you who just run through here have too much talk. Don't. The Prime Minister would not agree with you. You should keep your mouth shut. You're lucky I never come to St. Thomas.
Member from St. Catherine South.
You must control the member.
No,
madam.
you must control
Yes.
your mouth in the house on the mic. You are on record, member. St. Catherine South, you're on record, remember.
Speaker, Prime Minister, you take people's business for joke. Prime Minister, as you have said, lightly at the outset, this matter is not a contentious one. Those of us who would have been aware the Zozo bill came through the House with joint support on both sides. Participation was intense and the bill was enacted with the full support of the whole House. So the genesis of the bill has been a non-contentious one. But before I go further, Madam Speaker, usually the Minister of National Security would move these resolutions, and he's not here for ill health. I want to use the opportunity to wish for him a very speedy recovery from his medical procedure as was announced at the time. So as I said, Madam Speaker, it's not a contentious issue. The question is how successful the ZOZO implementation has been, as we all wished, then continue to wish, as an intervention towards the reduction of crime. But what we must also not lose sight of is that one of the inherent intention was never to just have a reduction in crime, but to have a sustainable reduction of crime in the communities that were identified and the ZOZO was declared in. It is quite a long time now since we have been having the ZOZO in these communities. As I said, from 2017 to now, started with one and the number incremental increase. In fact, I recall quite often the Prime Minister commented that, in fact, had failed to implement ZOZO in many other communities that members were making the request to be. But be that as it may, we have just 7 now. In the reports tabled of the 7, there are 2 of the ZOZOs which are in areas that were badly affected by the hurricane, namely the Mount Salem ZOZO, that community, and Norwood, where damages of significance. And Sablamar, yes, but I'm just going by the report, yes, but Sablamar is indeed one of our western parishes that have been affected. So, Prime Minister, I would want to suggest that as we seek to bring normalcy to all the communities that have been ravished by the hurricane, we remain mindful that these particular areas should be given particular attention because we had recognized their vulnerable states from then, why they were declared areas in the first instance. And in the midst of the hurricane, the post-hurricane period, we should make much effort to ensure that they are treated probably differently or a little bit better because they were worse off in terms of their contribution or the prevalence of criminal activities. So I want to posit that. Beyond that, Madam Speaker, reduction of crime is welcome. Reduction of murders, violent crimes are always welcome. But as I recall from a retired police officer, fact, I was reminded of it by a former commissioner of police and former minister of national security on that side. Security is not merely the reduction of murders. It is an environment where people feel safe. In other words, the numbers can go up very high and people still feel very unsafe. And we have experienced that in the country and vice versa. The numbers can go down of significance, which we want them to go. But what is also important is that we generate an environment of safety, of sense of security by our citizens. That's not an idea of mine. It's a well-established phenomenon. We can either decide to accept it and be guided by it, or we ignore it. Madam Speaker, we want to ensure that as the number of murders and violent crimes in general go down, that the reduction is sustainable. And we have always said there must be other interventions to ensure that sustainability. In fact, even the Zozo was considered one form of social intervention in that regard. If we embrace that as a critical input, then we must endeavor to deepen it and widen it so that the sustainability can be achieved. So I want to posit that we not just focus on the numbers that go down, but to ensure the sustainability. It is two shufflers make for a dance. Madam Speaker, we are coming from a point where much effort been made via states of emergency to reduce crime. And we saw that never gave us any result. In fact, ironically, the period that is being referred to by this reduction is the period since we have not had states of emergency. There's a direct correlation between both. That is not my opinion. You might not like it, but it's a matter of fact. So, but interestingly though, Madam Speaker, with the welcome reduction in murders, we have a significant increase in killings by the police. We can't ignore that. And if we do it at our own perils. So that must not be ignored. And that brings me to the other question, which has detained many Jamaicans. In fact, the Prime Minister, you yourself have made reference to it in not so long ago. The body-worn cameras. You have publicly voiced your support for the widespread implementation of body-worn cameras. Where are we with that? And it would be useful if you, Prime Minister, or anyone in the pertinent ministry can provide that update, and not only an update, but a roadmap, a schedule, so that we know when we are going to get where. It's not enough to say we are working on it, plans are afoot, all efforts are being made, because the truth of the matter, that has been said for quite a long time. But we are where we are. And to my knowledge, my information, we are way from fully implementing that. So I want to posit that for your consideration and response, Prime Minister. But talk about body-worn cameras, and it's all about SOE. I mean, the ZOZOs is all about crime reduction. And as I said earlier on, ensuring an environment of safety throughout our communities, and particularly in our public spaces and vulnerable areas. And that brings me, Madam Speaker, to the question of the CCTVs. Again, there has been open acknowledgement. The minister from Western St. Mary, when he was the minister in charge of the portfolio, made a celebration of the launch at the National Arena. He invited me then and I attended and gave full support. Spokesman and everything. So the then Minister of National Security made huge promises then about the rollout of closed circuit television throughout the country. Where are we with that? Again, it is incumbent on us to ensure that we have more and more safe and secure public spaces throughout the country so that our people can traverse their communities, traverse the country, and feel safe in their country, So I put it to you, Prime Minister, that would be welcome. It is and always been the commitment of the opposition to work, to collaborate towards ensuring that Jamaica becomes a safe place and remain a safe place by sustainable measures that are implemented. And I give my support to the passage of the resolution that is before us.
Member from West Central St. James.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support all 7 extension of period of operation resolutions. I just wish to focus on the resolution in respect of the Mount Salem zone of special operation. Mr. Speaker, the Mount Salem zone is the first zone, and it is the example by which the success of the law and all other zones has been judged. I note that the mandatory statutory report, which is contained in Ministry Paper 48 of 2025, speaks to an initial assessment post Hurricane Melissa, and that focuses on damage to the Mount Salem Primary School. I would like to use the opportunity to ask for a full assessment of the damage done within the zone, and to also, through you, Mr. Speaker, to the Prime Minister, ask for a convening of the Social Intervention Committee for the Mount Salem Zozo, and to remind that we have a major outstanding matter in respect of the Comfort Land Regularization Program, which has been far advanced, but its completion has been overtaken by a number of other matters along the way. And I wouldn't want the passage of Hurricane Melissa to further displace the completion that must be done. The zone has been in the built phase for a few years, but I agree with the Prime Minister that the zone as a model is more relevant today than ever before because of the balance that it strikes between security measures and community development measures. It is a law that has worked very well in the context of Jamaica. And I think my friend, the member from St. Catherine South, memory is a little hazy. It wasn't as smooth as he said, but in the end, the value of the framework has been celebrated on both sides, but it didn't start off smooth.
Member from St. and Southeastern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Prime Minister. I have two questions, and two questions because there is no debating, I guess, the value. What we want to ask about is to get additional clarity. And so the first question relates to, you did mention the overall reduction in crime and murders in the Zozos. If you could give us a breakout by Zozo, would be appreciated. Secondly, the long-term transition plan, because these are supposed to be temporary interventions that get us to a place where the state agencies can hold the gains. So the question, and not related, of course, to the member from South St. Catherine's point, what is the long-term plan? What is the long-term transition plan? And when will the ZOSOs be properly integrated into the other permanent government institutions? And then finally, the ministry papers do not speak to any kind of a, may I say, social assessment, any feedback from communities about how they're experiencing the ZOSOs. And I wonder if you have that information and can share, and in future, can we also get that as part of these ministry papers? Thank you, Prime Minister.
Member from St. Andrew Western.
Prime Minister, you would recall that on every occasion that we've had the discussion about the extension, while I've always supported, this side has always supported the call for extension of zone of special the extension of ZOZOs were always supported on this side, always, always. The record will show. Yes, the record will show ZOZO has always been supported. In fact,
Member.
The question was certainly coming from me and others. When will this be expanded elsewhere to other constituents? Always. No, please. No, shut your mouth. Yeah. It's 5 term and more upon you. Look. The Prime Minister, the question remains. The minister has always recognized, whenever we spoke, said, start by saying, yes, there's a need, but there are constraints. The question is, within the context of the resources now available, will there be an expansion, a measured expansion of the ZOZO, as we recognize that the balance of security and community development was always there. We recognize that and we supported it from day one. Prime Minister, when might we see some orderly expansion of the zones? These have been in place for many years. They are proven their worth beyond any doubt, and the question remains, when will that be expanded?
Member from Portland Eastern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Prime Minister, I also rise to give my overwhelming support to the extension of the zones of special operation. I just have a few comments to make. One, in terms of the reduction of crime, I'm sure the House can appreciate that the X factor would be a remarkable uptick in extrajudicial killings. I'm not seeing where in any of the reports anything that can quantify or justify the reduction outside of that. So on a human rights plane, one has to consider whether or not, when we're talking about restoration of human dignity in some spaces, whether or not the lack of use of body cameras, also the idea that extrajudicial killing certainly this year has been significantly increased, police fatal killings as another way people understand it to do it, whether or not this is one of the reasons where persons will apprehend fear and feel that their human rights are under attack, especially when you have families complaining that the persons who were killed, whether it was targeted or not, is actually one of the reasons why we have a reduction and is actually bringing fear. So that is something to think about. Zones of special operations, there is a call for other communities, and given its success, one wonders if a build out and moving to another space would not have been more effective in terms of crime reduction. It never was meant to be a stopgap. And Mr. Prime Minister, infrastructure is not a marker of changing the human aspect of a community. It is actually whether or not, when we look at, for instance, in one of these spaces, a smart bus stop for $4.7 million, if that is what is envisioned in terms of uplifting the morale of a community and changing the criminal aspects. So in terms of community in terms of community empowerment, what we want to change is social behavior and actually have persons within the community feel a sense of pride and feel a sense of upliftment in spaces. Except for the fact that one wonders if the extension is not given. I'm hearing myself respectfully. If the extension is not given, Mr. Prime Minister, the fear is we will regress into a situation where all the work would have been to naught because the persons in the actual community, there's no evidence that's saying that the lives of the persons are being uplifted, but rather there is regulation in a space that borders constitutionality. And so I'm asking you to consider, as we continue to say, I support what is being done, but whether these reports will be a little bit more targeted in saying that that these markers are being met, and again, whether there are timelines for exiting a particular community and intervention starting in other communities. That's the best. And then attribution for reduction. Mr. Prime Minister, it's important that we for public knowledge that we have exact statistics or insights as to the attribution for reduction that can be credited to the zones. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members, for your participation. Let me start with the member from Portland Eastern. In terms of attributions, we are ourselves contemplating a study to be done on the zones of special operations. It has been in operations now heading into almost 8 years, and I believe it is time for an empirical review to be done, and we have started along that lines already. So we will have a review done, an empirical study done on the zones of special operations, and that will give us more information as to how we can improve this strategy. The member mentioned increase in police killings, was also alluded to by the member from St. Catherine South, and I will say this: the police force has become far more effective in doing its job. I can say with great confidence that the JCF and the JDF have mainstreamed and internalized human rights training. It is part of their doctrine. It is part of their leadership culture. And they do try, as far as they can, to protect lives, including the lives of criminals. I hear a great deal of talk about the increase in the number of police killings. And I too have my own concerns about this, because I don't want it to ever be said that, our police force is the most lethal. That's not the kind of police force that we are trying to create. But I believe that on the other side of the ledger, on the other side of the argument, we must also be concerned about the propensity of criminals to challenge the police. I don't hear anyone saying, why are these criminals shooting at the police? Why, when they are stopped, why, when they are interdicted, they decide to challenge the police? As I have said earlier, we have invested heavily in our police force to make them more effective. And the Jamaican state must never be at threat or at risk of criminals. If criminals challenge the state, they must not win. Our police officers must go home to their families safely. That's right. So, whilst we do have our concerns, and we have put systems in place, both internally at the leadership level, we support INDECOM and its own operations. We encourage the internal review and use of force policy in the JCF. When we meet in the National Security Council, these are matters that are discussed because we want our police force to, more than anything else, serve, protect, and preserve life. This is also a message to the criminals. Save your life, don't challenge the police. So I'm hopeful that I have put that to bed. There is, Mr. Speaker, some duplicity in the arguments presented by the opposition. First, there is a call for more technology. Where are the cameras? Both body-worn and closed-circuit cameras, Jamaica Eye. We need the greater use of technology to improve security in public spaces and improve the outcomes of interactions between the police and the citizens. And I support this fully. And to reassure the member from St. Catherine South that just, in Cabinet 2 weeks ago, we approved a major procurement of over 1,000 body-worn cameras. And this is just one in a series of such procurements to come for more cameras. So it is underway. And just to be clear to the public, there sometimes seems to be the view that you can go to a store and just pick up a camera and stick it onto the police chest. Please, these matters are, I don't want to use the term sophisticated because by now the technology is fairly standard, but it requires an ecosystem for it to work. So it's not just cameras, it is also storage, archival for retrieval. It has to be up to a certain standard that what is stored reaches evidentiary levels. There has to be a system of how these cameras are maintained should there be failure. And then there is the whole business of putting in place the fiber optic connections, because where you download physically the footage is not where you're going to store it. So it has to be transmitted, and you have to make sure that you have that connection. So there's a lot to be built out before you can deploy body-worn cameras. And I'm assuring the public that the build-out is taking place, and we have signed off on a procurement for 1,000 body-worn cameras, which is not the final amount. They will procure in batches. And so the JCF will have body-worn cameras sufficient for its members to ensure that there is transparency and accountability in the police-citizen interaction. But on the other hand, there is a reservation that somehow investing in smart technology or infrastructure will not transform the lives of citizens. The member from Eastern Portland, the thesis of his argument is that the transformation of the man does not depend on the environment in which he is. The transformation of the man is that, allow me to make my point, as I allowed all of you to make yours. The thesis is that the program should focus on the human element of the problem, improving the man, rather than focusing on infrastructure. That's the thesis of the argument. Now, Madam Speaker, it is not just a philosophical point. It is absolutely important to policy. Yes, there to be a genuine change in how the person behaves, there has to be focus on programs that seek to change the mind. Improve behavior. No argument with that. But I encourage a member to consider that there are persons in the zones of special operation and right across our society where there has been no special investment in any program to improve their behavior or reward good behavior. They behave according to the standards and laws and expectations of the society simply because they are good citizens. Simply because they are good citizens. And this is what we miss in the debate about social transformation. We never seek to acknowledge and reward the youngster who lives in the harshest inner city community but never felt the need to take up a gun to prove his manhood. Never felt the need to join a gang. It is time that government policy shifts to supporting people who obey the law. Now, Madam Speaker, in every society, there will be persons who are deviants. And the only way to treat with deviants is to have the enforcement of the law. There are some people who we will have to support them emotionally, psychologically, yes. But we cannot compromise.
Hello. I saw you in the lobby yesterday. I never talked to an actual movie star.
Now you have.
You know I'm something of a performer too. You don't believe me?
I can't support your mother.
You're not gonna have to. I'm gonna step up in a way you can't even imagine. She's gonna be living on Fifth Avenue.
And that is what the zones of special operation is about. We are going into communities. We are breaking up the ecosystem of criminality. We are putting in place the infrastructure to ensure that there can be enforcement. And we are also putting in place the social intervention that will ensure that no one can have an excuse to say it is because of my social marginalization why I am in crime. And to also ensure that those people, though socially marginalized, who have not gotten involved in crime, that they are also supported. That is what the zone of special operation. So, Madam Speaker, the member from St. Andrew Western, I consider him my brother and neighbor. His point, unlike my sister from Success. We are all one family in St. Andrew. Madam Speaker, member from St. Andrew Western asked, so if the program has worked so well, why not expand it to other communities? And as I stand here and I ask members, tell me a community where murders are increasing year on year. In your constituency, Tony? No. You are standing on a point of order? Clarification.
Not necessarily about
Member from St. Andrew Western.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's not simply about as we speak, part of the challenge we're having is the amount of the more times when the police intervene to close off social programs, parties, and other things that people because they are shooting in the neighborhoods, and that happens certain frequently. I'm not talking about the number that crime is spiraling out of control. It's just happening sufficiently that it feels like suppression is taking place.
What the member is clarifying. But the bill, the resolution that we are debating is on the zone of special operation. The zone of special operation has a threshold, a trigger for which the measures can be applied. And one of the triggers would be that there is an increasing number of murders in a community. And one of the reasons why we haven't put in more zones is because we no longer have communities that meet that trigger threshold. Now, if members reflect on this is a major change from 2016 when we started to contemplate and actually implement it in 2017. Because then, Madam Speaker, we identified 20 communities in which we would have to implement zones of special operation. 20 communities, to the point where the member from St. Andrew South, after he came on board, because he only recalled from St. Catherine South, he only recalled when, there was agreement. But there was a time, especially when the bill was being debated, and the member from St. James West Central can tell you that there was significant opposition to the bill. But good sense prevailed. And when the effectiveness of the program was manifest, the member, because when he was speaking, I went online and looked for some of the reports. And there's a report of the member asking for more money to be given to the zones of special operations. So, Madam Speaker, why was this necessary? Because the program was so successful that everyone agreed they would like to get a zone of special operations. We didn't have enough money to expand the program. But, Madam Speaker, the programs, the zones that have been implemented have worked so well that they have had an impact on other communities. So there is no question, Madam Speaker, that zones of special operations have worked so well to the point where we cannot now identify a community that requires a zone of special operation. A major transformation of the criminal landscape in Jamaica. The member from South St. Catherine also pointed out, falsely so, that the states of public emergency did not result in a reduction in crime. Again, bringing a falsehood onto the national platform. That is absolutely not true. I am not calling the member a liar. I am merely saying what he said was not true. Between 2018 and 2019, when the first SOE was declared in St. James, murders declined by 70%. In fact, every year that we have used the SOEs, murders have declined. In 2020, the former leader of the opposition and myself agreed that that being an election year, we would not seek the extension of the SOE. That's correct. Without the extension of the SOEs, murders began to rise again. These are the facts. So, again, as I've said, Madam Speaker, I am going to make it a point of duty to dispel all the falsehoods that are being placed in the public domain. The member, again from St. Catherine South, asks that special attention be given to the communities that are under zones of special operation impacted by Hurricane Melissa. And the answer is yes. In fact, we are going to be focusing on them through the Jamaica Social Investment Fund. And in the reconstruction phase, they will get the special attention that they need. There are actually 3 communities that would be impacted. It would be Mount Salem, Norwood, and South. Now, the question would be, I believe I've answered all the questions. So, but
Member Russell, you had something?
The question about, I dealt with your question on the attribution, which would be stakeholder feedback. So we're going to do a study. We're going to do an academic study on the Zozo to see how well it works, and that will take into consideration the feedback of stakeholders. So, Madam Speaker, it is my great pleasure to have participated in this debate. I think it was very meaningful in elevating the national conversation and providing information to the public. May it please you, Madam Speaker, so I therefore move the motion be accepted and the 7 zones of special operations be affirmed or approved.
Thank you. The question is that the motions, we have several of the Zozos, notice of which the Prime Minister gave earlier, all be approved. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Thank you, members. House Leader.
So, Madam Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business today. Just to say that we do expect that this will be the final sitting before Christmas. We will break and return in January unless there's an urgent and pressing matter. So I would want to take the opportunity to wish you, Madam Speaker, and members of the House and the team headed by the clerk all the best for the Yuletide season and for them to keep safe. On a more somber note, Madam Speaker, I just wanted to use this opportunity just to note the passing of Mr. Lenworth Fulton, who served as president of the Jamaica Agricultural Society for a number of years and also served in government as the executive director of RADA, other agencies like the Jamaica 4-H, most of us would know him and have come to know him as a strong advocate for farmers and a champion for the rural economy, and we wish our deepest condolences to his family. Just to remind members, as you have indicated, that next week, even though there will be no parliament, we intend to use next week, Tuesday, to have a presentation from the Integrity Commission, which is very important in light of the fact that there is a requirement for statutory declarations to be filed by the 31st of December, especially it's for requirement for all of us. And I would urge all of us to come and engage with the new leadership of the Integrity Commission. With that said, may Parliament be adjourned for a day to be fixed. Oh.
No, say goodbye.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You may proceed.
On behalf of this side of the House, I would also like to join with the House Leader in wishing a very Merry Christmas to the clerk, staff of the House of Parliament, and indeed all the members of this House. I would also like to join in expressing my condolence to Mr. Lenworth Fulton. I worked with him when I was a director at the National Youth Service on a number of agriculture programs, some that are still in existence. And it is a great loss to the people of Jamaica. Wonderful.
Thank you. In requesting the adjournment of the House, there will be communication made to the entire House as it relates to the last CDF meeting that will take place after the Christmas period. We will only have one single meeting. I am encouraging all members of Parliament to have their projects submitted, whatever changes or corrections submitted. That will be the only meeting in the new year, after which we will conclude all our budgets, all our meetings, all our ability to be able to do anything else in respect of the Constituency Development Fund. So we will notify soonest when that last meeting will be held. I'm encouraging you to get your projects into the CDF unit so that you are not in any way disadvantaged. Members, as the House Leader indicated, there is no further business for the day, and I now seek your approval for Parliament to come to a close for the day, adjourn with no date, with a date, for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Thank you, members.